Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Welcome, Nitya. And today we're going to talk about maps as the mirrors to our society. And I have with me for this All Things Policy a guest internally from the Takshashila team, Nithiyanandam, who's a professor and head of geospatial research program here. He's also the lead author of the Takshashila Geospatial Bulletin, a monthly publication renowned for its research-driven insights derived from geospatial intelligence. His research portfolio encompasses a broad range of areas, including advanced remote sensing, image processing, GIS analytics, and the specialized fields of urban and ocean informatics, along with geospatial policy. Now, that was an intense introduction, Nitya. So, I'm Sowmya Prabhakar, COO of the Takshashila Institution. And for me, maps, Nitya, has been of great curiosity. In fact, the first touch point, I think, is more like a fundamental thing that one would engage in school with more of geography. But today, I see that it just expands and extends into a territory of how it can actually maybe predict crisis or look at digitization of land records. Right. And I think it pans into everything that I can possibly pick up and think. And I did realize in my recent conversation with somebody that, maps are very transactional in people's minds. It feels like, Google Maps, it takes me from point A to B. Right. But for me, maps have a lot more potential. And I was trying to tell them why it's important for us to even gamify this for youngsters to stay tuned to it, right? So let's begin with that. Where do you see from a minimal geography to how this society is now consuming maps, and where are we heading on that?
Thank you, Soumya. First of all, thanks for having me on this podcast today. So, as you said, the maps are, in earlier days, in ancient days, we have used it for navigation and identifying objects, right? Or remembering a location of an object. Grossly, at that time, there is no latitude and longitude. We started having maps in different forms, not in the form that we know in political map in A4 sheet or an atlas in a small textbook kind of thing and so on. But in the century, we all, so the maps has evolved in the form of printed ones or in the form of printed on sheets, printed on materials, different materials and so on. But those maps are again static. So, the maps that we have used in our school days are the static maps. So what we are dealing today is more of a dynamic map. It's not just a map where you can't change anything, you can't add anything, or you can't change the color of it. But today we have maps where you can do literally anything that you wanted. If one fine day, if you feel a place name got changed, a street name got changed, you can update it in a map immediately. And that is a power which is not only given to government, an individual or an independent researcher can also do that changes. That is the development that we have seen in these maps. As you said, it is indispensable from our activities and it is part of our regular work. And anybody who use smartphone, today it's a complete stupid question to ask anybody who use smartphone. No, almost every one of us use more than one smartphone these days. So if you use a smartphone, then the map and geospatial technology are inbuilt, and it is part of the every application that you use almost. So we are living with it. Knowingly or unknowingly, we have been using maps and geospatial technology every day for every application that we utilize on. So this dependency will also grow further and further in future. So we are heading towards more of location as a third identity that we all carry. So that will come in more, higher rate in subsequent applications when it comes.
Interesting. So for me, this is also a space where I believe, like a public policy enthusiast, like we look at data and say, okay, this is the decision we would take. More than intuition, I think information from the geospatial atmosphere will help us decide better as a country and, of course, as individuals also, right? And I remember, Nitya, in one of our tank scrub conversations, you had nicely brought about how even, say, public infrastructure or even planning of a bus stop or anything that we're going to get, right? Is heavily relevant in terms of ensuring that we get that right, in terms of demography also, right? So a little bit on that.
See, the example that you have specified, so ideally in early days, we go with certain thumb rules and certain calculations, right? The calculation include, let's say, where to find a suitable stop for a bus stop. Is it justified if you make a bus stop for a particular group of population, or where to place it? All those decisions comes with experience, and people on ground says, oh, this is a good point for supporting 10 villages, and the number of people going to school from this particular point is roughly this, because there is a record and there is a survey people have carried out. But then sometimes it comes with a biasness, right? So a particular person can say, a political party can insist for this facility to be in a particular place. How do you justify it in a transparent way? That transparency is something where the geospatial technology, especially maps in digital forms, has brought up, because you have information in layers. Let's say population being one layer of information. It's more like a notebook, right? You have different pages which are placed on top of each other. You have one layer where the population information is placed, population density, and the other layer you have in education infrastructure which is located, the other layer where you can have other facilities like a tourist spot and all those things, and a fourth layer one can look at the vacant lands which are available, which helps to make a meaningful and scientific decision for a suitable bus stop location. Or if it is for a railway station, you need to take other things in cognizance, but then the logic is same. You need to have information in different layer to make a analysis which is scientifically correct, and it is transparent. Like tomorrow, if somebody else comes and repeat the exercise, he or she will get the same result. It is not biased. It is just based on the pure data which is on the ground. So in that way, this has become an important application for making decisions in a transparent way, helps policymakers to make a decision which is shootable, and it is also updatable. So for example, if something changes tomorrow and there is a sudden influx of population in a particular place after an IT park for 5 years down the line, the policymaker can go back and revisit whether the decision taken earlier is correct or not, and the policymaker can rework on the solution. So otherwise, it's a conventional way. It takes a lot of time and effort to do everything from the scratch. Here, the database is there to an extent, and then you always keep on play with the database to update it and make new analysis and inferences out of it.
Interesting. So in a way, geospatial intelligence kind of shapes our roads, rails, and rooftops and everything that we can think about around us, right? So does this also solve for the kind of hiccup points we have for real estates and the digitization of land? So is there something intense already happening on that front?
Yes, it is. A lot of things are happening in India. When you said it also includes things on rooftop, like, when people are going towards solar rooftop based options for energy generation, typically it starts from measuring the rooftop area. Somebody sits in a different place, can measure your rooftop area and then say, okay, this is the solar potential of this given location based on sun elevation and insolation. The comprehensive calculation tells you what kind of technology you should go for and how much yield you can get and how much it will benefit in long term. That's a comprehensive exercise on geospatial technology. One. Second, a similar tool used in a different way for tax collection that we can see it in Bengaluru's tax collection portal also. There's an option for you to identify your rooftop and to draw a boundary of it. Then the tax will be calculated, adjusted based on it.
Okay.
But do it, there's something we also need to remember at this point. Is it feasible for everybody to draw that, to readjust? And, because location is a tricky thing, because the accuracy of location is a matter. And again, identifying your own houses on those maps is also critical. Though this technology is there, it is not exploited in an appropriate way in this case. But it could have been used in a better way. But then somebody felt like, this tool would make something interesting for the end user and something which can bring transparency. It is used in a halfway. It is usable for people like me to locate my house if it is an independent one. But if I'm living in an apartment, the story is different. But anyway, this is one application of it. The application that you talked about, real estate thing, we can do it by ourselves. We don't need a consultant indeed. If anybody opens a simple Google Earth application, which is user-friendly and it's simple graphical user interface, just open it and identify the area that you are planning to buy. And if it is a land that you're planning to buy, just go back in history and see what are the satellite images of that place says. What happens when a land is prepared for, distribution. At that time, the developers makes it nice. At times you will see a flat land divided with nice roads and they'll say this is coming there, this is coming there. Fantastic water supply, facilities. Everything is promised. But how do you know what was this land before the developers, grab it? The best and simple way is go to this kind of application and see by timeline. The images are there from 1980s and 90s onwards. You can at least go 40, 50 years now. And you can see what was the scenario earlier. And I remember a few cases, in our close relatives when they want to buy a land, it was nicely developed land on top of an vacant area. It is slightly elevated from the city also. It's now in Bengaluru, it's a posh area. But then when you looked at it, it was a rugged terrain where rocky things are there and so on. The repercussion of that, at that time, it was filled with rocks and soil, and then it was sold to several people. A lot of them constructed good number of stories of houses and so on now. But if you look at the groundwater, right, already you have elevated it artificially from the natural level. And in that area, you have rocky, terrain. The water table is so below and they're buying waters. The entire colony is buying water.
Okay.
So can we look at it? And other way around, if a developer developed a land and if you are seeing it, if you want to see it, how was it? Sometimes swampy lands. Now it is good to have lake view or, a nice vegetative surfaces next to your developed land. But if you go back and see in history, whether was it part of a marshland, those things have never been in any government records, right? Sometimes the records are hampered also. So can we go back and see the historical satellite image, at least for last 40 years or 50 years, and see what was it earlier to take cognizance? Because nature is something you can alter it for some time, but later on it will create its own repercussion.
Right.
So in the second case, it will get flooded during rainfall. And the first case, you will have scarcity of water during, even in, soon after a good monsoon also.
Right.
Because your underground water reserves are not there. So this is one example. But then the technology is not just identifying what was there in the past. The technology has developed to a stage where people in different countries use this as a indoor mapping of the proposed area, and it gives the customer a preview of how it will be if they look into their window, like what kind of view they get. And they calculate solar energy also in overseas, where countries have limited space and it's all of high rises. So they provide this kind of analysis to see what kind of ventilation I can get and what kind of view I can get from my window and how much time I'll get insulation in a year and what is the period of wind that I can expect it on my window. All those things are calculated. Accordingly, the facade of the building and its price also varies. So this application is something I don't think we are using it in India, but there is a scope to market it in a better way. It's a nice exercise to have a 3 dimension of buildings. Not just that, during emergency period, when the building is on fire and if there is any disaster, people, if somebody comes in from external forces, like the indoor security forces and people who lives in the building is aware of the exits.
Yeah.
But during critical times, nobody knows how to open a door. Is it pull or push? Nobody is aware when it is, completely covered with, fire and other smoke. So those things, these kind of 3D models really help. So we worked something in the past to propose this for critical buildings where VVIPs and others, stays and visits, so that the special forces can actually leverage it and quickly access to places. And rather than seeing things in 2D maps, everything would be there, but in 2D maps you don't know to pull the door or push a door. Right? So that information is crucial when you make it in 3D and using these technologies to a greater extent.
Interesting. I was actually coming to the disaster preparedness of sorts. So if we had to look at, say, mapping policies, say, from floods to tsunami or forest fires, so do you think at this point we are leveraging that kind of tech already to kind of predict these things coming?
See, there are indicators for certain things because the disasters that you have taken, some are predictable. Let's say tsunami is predictable to some extent because if it happens in somewhere in the world and then it have a ripple effect on our coastal areas. So we know the certain early warning systems, especially organization like INCOI is set up to understand this kind of changes and they ourselves prepared for this, thing. But another interesting aspect associated to that is the flooding or the coastal inundation. So that is something where you can model it and see if this particular area is, placed 5 meters above the sea floor level, mean sea level. What are the possibilities of inundation if an sea wave rises to a particular height? So these kind of things are there. And also one can place a mitigating factor. Let's say if I grow mangrove for certain meters on that particular close, will it stop this flooding to, proceed to further areas? So people created walls in Japan and other places. People created rocks. There are multiple mitigation factors. But how do you simulate it? Rather doing it on ground and waiting for the wave to come and to see its impact and potential benefits? Can we simulate it in in an environment digitally to see whether this will be an impactful one or not? Geospatial environment provides a platform. Earthquake is difficult to predict, but what we can look at is identifying vulnerable areas based on the sensitivity of the zone and also the kind of structures that we have and the population associated with it. If it is an open land, if it impacts the earthquake, it's not much of impact to us, but if it is a high dense populated area, that will have its own impact. So those things are something where the geospatial analysis comes in play, and then tracking the changes before and after the earthquake is something feasible from remotely sensed images, especially with microwave data. We call it as kind of deformation monitoring. We can see whether there's something which has changed in that particular area. Let's say people say, oh, my building is shattered and it is shifted to few minor changes like millimeter, centimeter levels. Those can also be detected using remotely sensed technologies. Other than that, for flood prevention, mapping and management of post-flood scenarios, the technology plays crucial role in different fronts. But at the same time, it's not a technology one can easily adapt and, resolve your real life problem. That requires scientific understanding of it and, a community of people who can leverage it in a better way. There are cases, the South Indian cities, which were surveyed using high-tech airborne lidars, using planes. And then it is expected if you survey it using the high-tech technology, it gives you all the, smaller elevation differences on ground. Technically, one can solve the flood as an issue, right? The management can solve it by utilizing the data. But in reality, after 15 years also, we are seeing the flood recurring in those cities, right? Despite the city has surveyed in a, using high-tech technology 15 years ago. One is how good the people have leveraged the data, one. If we do not have expertise, we should go out and fetch that expertise to utilize the data. There's nothing harm on it. The second aspect is while the technology is one front and we realize the scenarios, the society behaves in a different way. People still, encroach the water resources and things like that. And because the policymakers could not able to, address this problem in an effective way, despite having the recommendation from these data sets, still the problem continues. But if we use it effectively with strict rules and things, the problems like this can be minimized. At least the flood is something we can minimize it in Indian conditions.
All right. So if we take a step ahead and look at how this whole thing is more powerful in nature, right? Like just the concept of maps and the geospatial intelligence itself. So how is the government actually shaping up the accessibility of it, or is there transparency, or is it governed in any way?
Historically, this data or any data with location as an information is seen as a sacred data, and it is always kept as a secret. Because of secrecy in nature, a lot of data sets were never shared, and government departments works in a scattered way. Some government departments, state department, a few years down the line in capital has invested huge money in getting fantastic data of the state. But then the data set were never shared with other people, other government departments. Sometimes the funding agency itself are unable to get a full-fledged data which the people produced by taking funding from an organization. So this was the scenario, you can say, before 2022. And in 2022, India has taken a very bold step. Before that also, we had different policies, scattered efforts, but it was never enforced in a strict way. But in 2022, we had a comprehensive national geospatial policy, which is a comprehensive policy, I should say, but it has too much of visions and too much of tangible timelines. In one way, it is good. On the other way, after seeing 3 years now, close to 2.5 years now, we have started worrying whether we could be able to achieve it in a tangible timeline that we have given. That is a challenge. But there's something visioned like how India has to be in 2035. The idea is to have a 3D digital twin where everything above the surface, below the surface, below the water, everything has to be mapped in 3D front in the geospatial environment. So that is why I said in years to come, you will find this application is penetrating, to you in a multiple fold, in multiple ways. If you are not aware of the subject, then you will be considered as, an illiterate to an extent, because it will be attached with you in many forms. The second challenge of it, the geospatial policy has broken the common challenge that we faced was a restriction on the data sets. The restrictions on the data sets are open. Following that, the space policy also liberated the remote sensing data to some extent, and ISRO has opened a few satellite images for free. Otherwise, generally, we have a feel like if an organization is built on taxpayers' money, what is an harm in opening the data set that you generate to some extent freely for Indian researchers and people of India, or at least to different governments within India? But it was not the case. But now the policy has liberalized some of them. It has enabled the free flow of data between organizations, and the data which is generated from the taxpayers' money has to be shared with government entities at least, and to some extent with entrepreneurs, and some extent few data sets we can leverage it. Nevertheless, few data sets which we have opened, our mindset has not completely moved away from it. We still made so much of restrictions to it, and though it is called open data, we still have a lot of hurdles to access it. My fear is the policy is ambitious. In 2022, we were very happy in December 2022. 2023, 24, we are okay. In 2025, we are worried whether the momentum that we had in that policy, will it be carried further, and are we in a position to achieve what we have looked at in 2035, what we expect in 2035 as an output, or it is going to be one more policy which has faded away in the past. But this is an effort from government which is good. But there's another one called land records. A lot of efforts on digitizing lands are happening in different parts of the country, including northeastern parts of the country.
Yeah, we were talking about it.
So, earlier days, when a person A buys a land from person B, and if a person B forged the documentation by hiding his own siblings and so on, for example, then after selling the land, if the person B will get penalized for hiding it, but then the person A who bought the land will not get much of things. Here, government is trying to come up with an insurance kind of thing where the people can take the precautionary measure, and government ensures the ownership of the land digitized using remote sensing data sets and geospatial data sets, and tagging their ownership on the land. So even you go abroad, your land will be remain associated with your entity and nobody can forge it in your absence. This may not be an interesting case in urban setup, because we all know everybody compounded their houses with walls. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Exactly.
But in rural areas, the boundaries are actually a small footpath, a muddy footpath in agriculture lands where one can slightly move couple of centimeters at least every overnight. If you just wash the mud and put it on the other side, the boundary changes, and the surveying techniques are also not precise to come back and point you like, oh, your boundary was that and you moved a bit. It's very difficult to say. But in this case, if you know that virtual fencing of your boundaries exists and then it is associated with you, even a person dies, only their legal heirs can access to it. So these are the advantages the digitizing of land records have brought in, because after all, the most number of cases on the court is because of the land dispute, right? So we can solve this problem effectively if we can do it effectively on ground, but there's good efforts taken in different states and ministries have worked on it.
Interesting. So the fencing, every time now people buy a plot, the first thing is you want to guard it with a fence, right? It begins from there. And that's why maybe that conservative approach of not giving out data. But if location is our new social currency, Nithya, then do you think the marketplace is evolving accordingly? Like say there's a lot of thing about fintech and other things coming along, right? So are there enough organizations or startups looking at map technology and everything around it?
I think it's very limited, and we could have leveraged better compared to our neighbors, especially the northern neighbor is something we generally look at, right, compared to China. So we could have leveraged in a better way. I would say that. But for that, you need to have geospatial basic foundational layers should be, openly available for Indians. Even as a researcher, we generally goes to an overseas website in the past to get the geospatial boundary of our country.
Okay.
Because for a very longer period, it was not available openly. Now it is available to some extent. So it is just a political boundary of a country, right? Not a detailed one about your locality and town or district or state and so on. But you need to have more and more information what we have collected to taxpayers' money available for these entrepreneurs to make use of it. Right? I'm not going to talk about the modalities, how you will leverage it, what is a financial, deal that you can struck with the entrepreneurs and so on. But if you make this data available to them, they can build solution based on it rather than reinventing and surveying all the stuff. That is one. Whosoever has leveraged this kind of data sets for a very long time are only capable of building navigation apps also. There's one thing like why we can't have a fifth app or fourth app on navigation technologies in India, because it's not just a matter of data set, it's a matter of historical movement of people, road information, the vehicles going on the road, category of vehicles, the period in which the heavy traffic was observed, and all those things comes together as a better navigation system one would like to prefer. Google by default collecting this information across the globe, carries the weight. And Map My India, is doing a fairly good job of having it, because most of the systems are sitting on cars in India, and then there are few users, more number of users are using it these days, but then not to a level comparable to the Google apps. But Map My India is the second one, largely people utilize it, and many other navigation system comes, Ola,
Right.
try to do it. The other navigation interest comes from a people whosoever collects the data. So if anybody, an entrepreneur who wants to do this kind of thing, they can't do it because you're not collecting that position information.
Right. Huh.
While India is aiming for a indigenous navigation system called NAVIC, when it comes in and when the positioning based services flourishes, then India can expect big boom in this industry. Because this is the same way the Chinese have utilized the positioning system to a greater level, Baidu, and then they have flourished economy around it. So that is the bigger thing that we are waiting for, to have an indigenous, full-fledged working navigation system. Other than that, data liberalization is required. Other than that, the promotion of culture where people can look at new technologies and application. Right now, the industry see government as a prime partner for business on these technologies. But it would be better if the industry sees a customer, the end user, directly as a potential business opportunity. And then if they start providing solution more and more towards the user, it works. In the introduction, we talked about a dating app, right? You specified it as one of a use case. Yes. So the primary thing which stays in Tinder and other dating apps is the location information. So the application is built directly to the customer rather, for some other purposes. So the geospatial intelligence, in short, is not restricted to government services or security services. It is on many aspects, including business, real estate, disaster management, and so on.
Yeah. In fact, we were talking, right, how a hospital, where it's located, because it's an emergency care you want. When we're picking up a place, we are almost thinking about all tangents, right? A school, a hospital, a convenience store, a supermarket, or anything that is like a park. Right. So these are things that makes living a little more quality in everything that we would like to access, even in an apartment for that matter, are these facilities there. So geospatial intelligence, like you said, deeply seeps into our daily lives. It's not even like just for intelligence for geopolitics. And
it starts from where to keep your supermarket and where to put your clinic. If you are intend to open a clinic, what is an ideal place to open a clinic? If you intend to put an ATM, what is an ideal place to put an ATM? Or to deploy your, the people on ground for selling credit cards or selling any other thing. How do you gauge the business opportunity exists on a place? By having this kind of information and overlaying and narrowing down to areas where the potential business opportunity exists, be it Decathlon, be it KFC, or any chain of foodstuffs or supply chain things. It's all planned in this way. So the foundational information is there. Thereafter, people place it. Then only they could able to make the maximum out of their location benefit.
Right. Interesting. So I'm so glad we got to do this episode, Nitya, more so because as much as it impacts our daily life, the way it meets the governance components and the complexity in terms of the geospatial intelligence with geopolitics interacting there, or even for climate crisis, or just looking at how our urban infrastructure, right? Every day morning we're struggling with whatever the Bangalore scene is. But I'm saying if we can better plan this with enough data that we get from different sources, and like you said, it could also be crowdsourcing by common people. We always do that, right? You reach a place and it asks for more accuracy and all of that. So there is a lot of futuristic flavors to this whole conversation, and maybe even it extends into like mitigating well and better prepared for situations which are natural disasters, which were a little more maybe more developed at this point in time. So there's a lot on the ethics and access as well that might come up, because it's a huge data that we're going to anticipate from different sources. But I think that aside, geospatial interest is something that possibly everybody should be caring about, and it's very application oriented is what makes it really interesting. So I'm so happy that we've been able to touch this framework of how it impacts the society and what we should do about it, how the sarkar and the government and the governance side of it is looking like, and how the market has evolved. In fact, it gives a lot of opportunity for new things to be explored, right? I mean, there is a good reason why people should jump into becoming map entrepreneurs, maybe.
Kind of.
So thanks a lot, Nithya, for being here and having a chat on this interesting topic. Any final words?
See, just a final aspect to cover. The privacy aspect is also becoming a concern when you get more and more data. The nature is, if somebody asks us before collecting the data, it's fine. But at times, the positioning system, especially the maps and all, we are so happy to see Google informing us, the road that we are heading through is occupied, or it is empty, it is congested. But it is something, until recently, it is taken in the backyard based on your driving behavior, based on the way that you're going. But in recent days, it asks you, right? Because a lot of regulations happened in those countries. So they started taking concerns in a more way. Otherwise, we generally give yes when we are setting up our phone, setting up our applications, right? Most of the time. But here, there are certain measures taken by them. And maybe we as a country, India, should also look at those regulations as per our requirement and post those things, and to reduce the privacy, infringements, because location is a sensitive thing. If I know where I have traveled in a particular day, minute by minute or second by second, sometimes we feel it's okay. But if that information is shared even with a family member or even with an external guy who builds a business solution around it, that is something where nobody likes. So that needs to be taken care. And secondly, the data sets, when we open also, the ecosystem should also be developed to appreciate the data, to keep more on ethical aspects in mind while utilizing somebody's data, sharing somebody's data, and building applications on it. Because it's very difficult to identify the data sets which are taken and modified in the geospatial front, because it's affiliated to the location, which is not going to change, right? So that way we need to have a large pool of educated, learned people. At least it is essential to know the fundamentals of the subject, where you can prevent yourself, you can build a new business out of it, or you can better utilize it. At least you can better manage the apps that you have on your phone, when to give access, when to say no, or what apps should get access and what not. Is something, at least you should get a fundamental knowledge of this different parts of the subject, because this is going to be a game changer in next 10 years at least.
Yeah, because in our daily lives today, pretty much everybody has a FASTag to clear your tolls. Or if you're in an apartment, you also have a MyGate or a Park Plus, which will open, the boom barriers will go, up and down. So I think, like you said, it's important to be wise on how much you want to kind of expose yourself as well, and be a little more mindful on the privacy.
Yeah, but while we are talking on the FASTag itself is going away. And we are going to a new GPS or GNSS-based toll collection system, which is precisely on geospatial technology. While the merits are put out, the only challenge is of detecting money directly from the bank account. That's one of a privacy concern that it comes along with this beautiful technology. It's not because of the technology, it is the way that we are, building it around it. So our daily life would be more and more on this technology. At least start reading about it. If not, at least follow our work in Takshashila. You'll get a little more insights on what we are doing. And indeed, we are trying to have an expert capsule course led by top experts in the country on introducing the fundamentals of the subjects in a leisure way on weekends, especially on Saturday, first off, for 4 Saturdays with 8 lectures. The idea is to touch different aspects of geospatial to a commoner who have never studied the subject. If you have studied geospatial, don't come to this course. If you have never studied and if you have interest on the subject, or after the podcast, if you think I need a platform to learn, then please do join us. And the early bird registration closes soon on 30th of April, and the course begins on June mid. So if you are interested, do write to us and do follow our webpage for more updates. And we also do some cutting edge geospatial intelligence works at Takshashila, especially called Geospatial Bulletin, and a small group of members works on different areas on geopolitical and India's interest wherever it lies through the geospatial lens we look at. And please follow our page and please follow our work and support us for more interesting works.
Okay.
Thank you, Sowmya.
Yeah. Thanks, Nithya. Like I said, this topic is of interest to me, and a lot of times in my own interactions, I try and explain to people that how it's part of our daily life and very application oriented, which excites me. So thanks for being on this All Things Policy podcast.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Okay.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.